How many of you have ever been pulled over by a police officer? Why don't you look around at the people that don't have their hands raised and ask yourself the question, are you telling the truth? But if you've ever had that lovely experience in your life, I'm guessing the very first thing that went through your mind was this feeling of guilt, right? Because you asked yourself the simple question, what did I do? You know, the lights go off, and if the siren comes on anymore, that's a bad thing, because that means you haven't been paying attention, which means they're going to be really worked up, right? And you kind of go, what did I do? And the amazing thing is, you can feel guilty even when you're not guilty. Even crazier than that is that you can feel guilty when you are guilty, and you cannot feel guilty when you are guilty. And it's interesting what that feeling of getting sort of caught, sort of trapped, does to us. Because if you've never been pulled over, you've probably been one of the following. You've been called into the principal's office, or your boss's office. Or you've heard from your significant other those 4 words that nobody ever wants to hear. That's right. We need to talk. And at that moment, when you get called in, when you hear that thing, immediately goes through your mind is that feeling of guiltiness, right? Oh no, what did I do? And sometimes we get that feeling and there's nothing we've done, but other times, we get that feeling and there is something we've done, and for some of us that's the right feeling because, there's a reason you got to talk. But it's always interesting when we get into those discussions, when the officer says, do you know why I pulled you over? And all those funny sayings that you've heard, the jokes that you're supposed to get back that, you just kind of goes in your mind, you think, I better not say that. I have no idea, officer, or I do. I was probably going a little bit fast. But then right away, we all kick into this thing, sort of the self-preservation mode. And we want to explain it. We want to justify it. We want to say, I didn't see that. I wasn't aware. I was on my way to the store right now to buy the taillight so I could install it. Or I just got a ticket for that earlier today, and I'm going to take care of it. But there's something in all of us that the immediate response to those kind of situations is we feel guilty, and we try to figure out a way to get away from that guilt and that feeling. So today we're going to look in this whole, continue our series on crazy talk, kind of a crazy thing that Jesus says. In fact, I'm going to be honest with you this morning. This week when I kind of looked at this passage that I'd kind of laid out at the start, I kind of thought, Mike, why'd you do that one? That one just, it's sort of one you're going to hear. In just a moment, we're going to read it together. You're going to go, so what? That's going to be your response because it was my response, and the people I've talked to, it's been sort of their response. You read this and you go, well, that doesn't really kind of affect me. And our problem is not in what Jesus says, it's in how we respond to what Jesus says. How willing we are to kind of listen and to consider maybe what he's talking about isn't what it first seems, but is actually speaking to something much deeper in our lives. And so in just a moment, we're going to get over to Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 33. But before we get there, I want to invite you to bow your heads, and let's pray one more time together, right? Lord, slow us down for just a moment. And in the process of slowing us down, help us to disengage from all that goes on around us in the life and our week. And just for this moment, just for this time, to experience what Sabbath is about. A disengaging and an engaging. And for some of us, that's the most vulnerable time of our lives, to disengage from all the stuff that keeps us busy, keeps us working, keeps us occupied. But at times we just need to stop and consider and ask ourselves some questions that life doesn't always let us ask. And so today, we just invite you in this space, into this place, and ask you to speak to us in a way that is sort of crazy, in a way that goes beyond our ears into our very souls. And so today we just ask that that you would speak to us now in your name. Amen. Let me give you the context. We've talked about this the last couple of weeks. Jesus in this great sermon has sort of switched gears, and he's told this group gathered on this hillside, by the way, you got to be better than the people within your community, within your faith community, who say they're the best, those who have defined what faith looks like. You have to be better than them. And of course, their answer was, remember what it was? How's that possible, right? How's that possible to be better than those that have sort of defined what better looks like? And Jesus says, well, let me tell you. And so today he gets into his third of these sections of sort of these legal kind of things, when he reminds them of what they've heard. And here's what he says. Folks, you have heard that it was said to our people long ago, don't break your promises. That is, don't break your oaths. But keep, that is, fulfill those promises, those oaths you make to the Lord. And everybody in that room, everybody in that hillside that day would have shaken their head saying, yes, that's right. We've heard that. We've heard to be very careful about the oaths we make, especially the oaths we make to God. In fact, they have stories. There's stories in the Old Testament part of your Bible that you can go and read that are these amazing stories of people who kept their oath to such a degree that it doesn't make sense to us. There's the story of a guy who comes back from a battle, and out in the battle he says, God, whatever, if you can help me win today, whatever, when I get home, the first thing I see when I get to my property, I'm going to offer it as a sacrifice to you. I guess he's thinking maybe one of the goats will come out bleeding to him, and his daughter shows up. And the story goes that he follows through because he made a vow to the Lord. And that would have been held out in front of those people. A reminder of just how careful you have to be when you say, God, I'm making an oath to you to follow through with that. They would have understood this, and they would have all said, yes, we understand that we shouldn't break them, but we especially ought to keep those promises we make to the Lord. But Jesus says, as he's done the last couple of weeks, but I tell you, do not swear an oath at all. Knock it off. Because you're getting all wound up in this whole idea, what's an oath to God, and if I've made a mistake in that, how do I get out of it? He says, just knock it off. In fact, he goes on and says, don't swear an oath using the name of heaven, because it's God's throne. Don't swear an oath using the name of the earth, because the earth is God's. Don't swear an oath using the name of Jerusalem, because it's the city of the great king, it's the city of God. Don't go to any of those things and kind of put in your stake, I swear to God is how we would use it today. Don't do that. In fact, he says, I'm going to make it simple for you. Don't even swear by your own head, because you cannot make one hair on your head become white or black. To which all of us chuckle because we go, Jesus, I know some people. I don't even know what color her natural hair is anymore, right? So don't tell me I can't. But Jesus' point is not, we kind of, I can, but you cannot change the color of your hair permanently. Because every few weeks, right? But Jesus' point is, don't swear by even yourself. Because you can't control some of those things. In fact, he bottom lines it to him. He says, listen, say only yes if you mean, and say only no if you mean. Say what you mean, and mean what you say. Drop the mic, walk off the stage. Right, Jesus? That seems simple enough. His appeal to be clear in what we say and mean what we say and to do what we say. In fact, we may read this and go, why is this such a big deal to Jesus? This is kind of sort of a duh, Jesus. Kind of a duh thing. Why? Obviously, we should say what we mean and mean what we say and not get kind of wound up and, swearing by this and swearing by that. But Jesus adds a little piece at the end that in my mind is the explanation for this whole point. And here's what he says. Anything more than this is from the evil one. I wish I had an organ, dun, dun, dun. That's the tone I hear in that. Anything more, any addition to a simple yes or no is from the evil one. And people, if you want to be good people, if you want to live right, you don't want to have any evil kind of in you. The interesting thing is, these three words, the evil one, are not in the original language. In fact, this word is only translated this a handful of times. Oftentimes it means something else, and here's what it means. It means hurtful in influence or effect. It means wicked. It means bad. It means diseased. Which the question has to be, how do we get to the evil one out of this whole thing? And to which, if you go back and read some stuff, and read these commentators, these scholars who study this stuff and try to pull apart this stuff, the implication seems to be that if we go beyond that, there's something that begins to deteriorate in our language. when we try to be more than we are, gets us in trouble. And if you know much about the story and some of the ideas about how this whole idea of the devil and how the devil became the devil, oftentimes one of the pieces talked about is that he wanted to become more than he was. And when we use that language to try to puff up, to try to build up, to try to make us more than we are, we can find ourselves in trouble. I mean, why is this such a big deal to Jesus? And the better question maybe is, why isn't it a bigger deal to us? I mean, it seems like every week we hear stories of somebody who has padded their resume, somebody who has included claiming some things that aren't true. One of my favorites, and I'll hear conversations at the time, and I've been guilty of this as well, I'll admit to it. You know, you're in a conversation, and I'm telling Fernando about, I had this conversation with this person, and we both know this person, and I'm kind of acting real tough, and I said, man, I told him this, and I told him that. When what I really mean is, I wish I had told him this, or I wish I had told him that, right? But I kind of liked my job, or I kind of didn't want to, but I'm telling you, this is what I told him, when in reality, I wasn't even close to that. But this idea to be more than we are, to sort of back up, to make ourselves feel better by the things that we add to our lives. See, the issue isn't oaths. It's why we feel compelled to go there. Why we feel compelled to add on something to our language or to our resume or to our situation. You know, you're talking to somebody, they don't seem to be responding to you, and so you say, well, I did talk to the boss about this, whether you did or not. You're trying to kind of move them. And isn't that the question we need to ask ourselves? Why do we feel compelled to go there? I think the summary is that we are more about believability than credibility. We want people to believe us. That's why when we're having a discussion, Sherman and I say, hey, believe me because, I go off. And let me give you a little experience. I have been a huge fan of the show Cops. It's been on for like more than 2 decades. Anybody else a Cops fan out there? Yeah, a few of us, all right. Too bad for the rest of you, Part of the reason I love it is my dad was a police officer for almost 30 years, and so it kind of resonates. It resonates with the stories I grew up with. It resonates with my idea of justice and sense, and it resonates with me just how stupid sometimes people are. How they get caught doing stuff, the answers they get when they get caught doing stuff. You see the guy, get out of the car, he runs, he gets tackled, he gets up and he says, I wasn't the one driving. And you're like, really? And of course, you know how you get kind of stuck in that situation. Here's one of the lessons I've learned from that, You don't just stick with that, you begin to throw out some other things, right? You begin to say things like, I swear to God, that wasn't me. You got the wrong guy. The other one they go to, I swear on my daughter's head. Because if I'm going to do that, that means I'm really serious about this. To which I've learned that anytime somebody begins to swear in other stuff, it begins to make their argument very suspect, right? Because we think we're building it up and we're just taking the life out of it. Cops is a great summary of this whole idea. And it really tells us why we turn to swearing. That is, we want to get ahead, in front of, or away from something. Let me think of the last time that you sort of embellished your discussion. The last time you added something to it. You were making a sale and you just wanted them to really make the sale, so you kind of added a little bit of stuff that may not have been completely true. Maybe you were, what's the term now? I was a little reserved with the truth, Or you're trying to get in school and you begin to kind of add up all the stuff that you've done and all those wonderful community service hours that you gave to the community. When in reality you were just picking up paper or doing something. But, you kind of puff it up because you really want to get into the school. But so often we kind of go to this swearing. We go to this adding stuff, which is what Jesus is talking about. I don't swear by this or swear by that because we want to get ahead of something, go farther in our position quicker. We want to get in front of something because we know something's coming up, so let me get my position straight and clear. We want to get away from something. Not only that, we go to swearing because we don't want to be caught, embarrassed, or exposed. Which again is a lesson I've learned from cops. You know, they find somebody hiding under one of those little kiddie pools in the backyard of somebody's house at night. Dogs are all barking. And the guy says, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "I'm just sleeping." Because that's the kind of place you'd go to sleep, isn't it? Somebody's yard you don't know, underneath a little pool, right? But we're fearful, and when we get fearful, when we're worried about getting caught or embarrassed or exposed, our natural tendency for a lot of us, and we go to this idea, let me kind of come up with a story. And we're going to have a little truth thing right today at this moment. How many of you have ever done this? You've told some kind of story that wasn't true, or at least some parts of it wasn't true, so I'm not going to give you any wiggle room here. And you did it because you didn't want to be caught, embarrassed, or exposed. Really? Thank you. Yes, I get another one there. Yeah, okay. Because there's something in all of us that when we feel like we ought to feel guilty, and we don't want to feel guilty, and so we just figure, if I don't own up to it, it's not true. When I think about this, I always think of my oldest son. I don't have permission to tell us, but I don't care because it's true about him. Hey, Aaron, if you're watching today. When he was growing up, I would watch him. I'd be like coming down the hallway, and I'd see him in the hallway, and I'd stop and kind of look at him. I kind of wake up. Dave, I kind of wake up real quietly behind him, kind of watch him. And maybe he'd be writing on the wall, for example, when he was real small. And he'd get done, and he'd turn around, or I'd say something to him, and he'd jump. And I would say this, "Why are you writing on the wall?" And you know what his answer was? "I wasn't." To which I would say, "What do you mean? I stood here and watched you do it." To which his answer was, "No, you didn't." And I learned right away that he was going to have some challenge with this in life. But there was something. This was more than just him telling a lie. This was more than him not owning up. This was something that's deeper. And the reality is, this is something that's deep within all of us. That none of us like to get caught. That none of us want to be exposed. We don't want to be embarrassed. And so what we'll do to not be those things pushes us in this way to tell these things, to embellish, to add stuff to it. And we swear to add weight to our words. Because I'm so serious about this, I swear to God, or I swear on my child's head, or I'd swear it all good. Whatever the thing that we kind of throw in there. And we think it adds weight, but in the process, we end up reducing those words. So one of the ways you can tell when somebody's not telling the truth. When they tell you too much of the story, too many details. Because the more we get caught up, the more we kind of embellish. There's a saying that's been around for years. I don't know who to give credit to, but you've probably heard it. That is, if you tell the truth, you don't have to have a good memory. Now, let that sink in for a second, yeah. Because if you don't tell the truth, you have to have a good memory, right? Because I always love hearing people's stories, especially the third or fourth time, because then you find out, really? I thought you were in Peru, not Brazil when this happened. I thought you were seeing your mother-in-law, not your boss. All those kind of things that come out, but you got to forget those pieces. But we also turn to swearing because we are afraid that who we really are isn't enough. That I have to add some power to my words. Because either they're not going to believe me or they really shouldn't believe me, and so I got to figure out some way to say what I need to say or to get them to believe what I need them to believe. Because I want them to believe me. Remember, this is not about credibility. We're more about believability. I just want to have them believe it so I can get through this and get on with stuff. And the overwhelming challenge in our lives is genuineness. It's the thing that comes up and hits us all the time. Am I true to who I really am? Or if I sort of set up this false thing and I have to kind of keep setting up false things and false things. I have a friend who says the most dishonest time in any relationship is when you first start to date. You get all fixed up. Guys actually take a shower and get cleaned up. She gets all of her stuff going on, Got so much stuff you don't know what she really looks like, but that's okay because it's all about looking good right now, right? It's like fishing, you want to get the right bait out there. And after you get them hooked, then, it's a whole other story. But it's that whole kind of thing. And so much what Jesus is talking about in this whole Sermon on the Mount is this idea that the overwhelming challenge of our lives is genuineness, and it's not genuineness in saying, this is what we're supposed to do, this is the rules, just do the rules. But no. Who have I become? Who am I becoming? As God works in my life, as God molds my life, as God tries to push me, or pull me, or hold me, or rock me to the place He needs to get me. I saw this quote this week. I got a drink of water here, excuse me. I saw this quote this week that's attributed to that great, well-known scholar, which says, the worst thing about being lied to is knowing that you're not worth the truth. It's the idea of genuineness again. And for Jesus, this idea isn't just about keeping some rule. It isn't just about being simple in your language or honest in your language. For Jesus, this is about what this temptation to embellish does to relationships. How it twists it. How it diseases it. How to use that language of His that says, anything more is from this evil one, this evil concept that is always in us. And it's the thing that wears on and at times destroys relationships. And that is why I think this matters so much to Jesus. And why the question for us shouldn't be just, why does it matter to Him, but why doesn't it matter more to me? And as I thought about it this week, the times when I've tempted or the times when I step across that line to embellish, to add to, so much of that is about my desire just to get through this situation. Just get through it with it as quick as possible and be done so I don't have it kind of hanging over my head. Or my desire not to be caught or embarrassed. When in reality, Jesus is not looking for perfection here. He's looking for genuineness. He's looking for us to be genuine in our struggles, to be genuine in our brokenness and in our needs. Because sometimes our goals, our intent, gets lost in our goals and our intent. So here's what I think Jesus would say to us today. I think He would say, let your word be enough, because it is. To believe that we can be yesers and knowers. English teachers, I apologize. But you get my drift, I hope. To be people who aren't just simple in their language, but clear in their language. And clear when they say something that it really Gives evidence of who they are. But to believe that our word is enough, that we don't have to add stuff to it, we don't have to embellish more. And then at times that will come back and tell us that means we're not good enough, that we don't qualify, that we don't have enough of this or enough of that to make what we want to get. But that's okay. But not only to let our word be enough because it is, but also to trust that the power of your words is in your power. Because it is. You control the things you say. And you have more power than you were aware of. Our problem is we don't believe that we have enough power, or we're afraid of what that power might do. And that is why Jesus says, you've heard it's important to make your vows, to be honest with God, and when you make a vow to Him, to follow it through, even if there's some pain and suffering from it, because that's important. There's some kind of value in that. That's what you've heard. But I'm going to tell you, don't do that. Don't make any kind of vows, any kind of claims. Rather, say yes when you mean yes, and no when you mean no, and I don't know when you mean I don't know. As opposed to making up some kind of story so you feel better and they feel better. Because you have power. But anytime you try to add to that power, there's something that happens. There's something diseased about that. There's something that's kind of tainting about that. There's something that's not right about that. There's something that really is evil and ugly and bad. And for us to recognize that when we do that, it's not coming from a good place. In fact, it's coming from a really bad place. So let me close this way. What if? What if, when faced with the temptation to swear or embellish, our first thought wasn't self-preservation, but honesty? What if for just this next week, that all of us in this room and all of us watching online, wherever we're at, for this next week, every time we had a conversation, it was about being honest. Not honest in the, I finally got this chance, Pastor Mike said I could do this now. Boy, I've been waiting. Eileen, let me tell you something real honest. That's not what I mean here, right? You ought to mean what you say and say what you mean and not be mean about it, all right? But what if this week it was about not embellishing? Not trying to add to, not saying, well, I talked to so-and-so to get their kind of credibility over with yours. What if we're simply about, this is my idea. This is my thought. This is my honesty and nothing more, nothing less. And to see how that might change our relationships, our conversations. How it might surprise some people in your life. Especially if you're one of those people that always has to add something more to a conversation. Because wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where people were honest and clear and simple in that honesty and clarity? I think this is so needed, especially as we enter these next few months here in the United States, with this lovely thing we do every few years called electing a new president. This is not a political speech, by the way, so just relax. But it is a recognition that what we all fear is probably most likely to happen, because it already has happened. And it will get uglier and nastier and meaner. And the problem is it will bleed over from not just candidates, it will bleed over into our lives. Because each candidate will press certain buttons within each of our lives. things that resonate with us, things that we dislike, things we want to be clear that we dislike. But let's not lose sight of in our frustration or our anger or our disappointment or our disgust, whatever term you want to put to it, let's see if we can keep it simple as possible and clear as possible. And to pray for our nation. Because whoever ends up in that spot has a really tough job. And whoever ends up in that spot will affect our world and the world around us. So that's the end of my political speech. I want you to take out that Connect card that Pastor Dave talked about earlier. And every week, we like to give people a chance just to sort of take another step in their faith journey. And so this is the question we've been asking. I'm going to get right to the card. So maybe your next step today is to see this as a bigger deal in my life. Maybe that's your takeaway today. To kind of recognize, it's a big deal to Jesus. Maybe it ought to be a bigger deal to me. Maybe your next step today is to realize how fear pushes you to embellish and bolster your talk. Maybe to be honest about that it's really fear that drives you. Maybe your next step today is to hear what you need to hear and to do something about it. So I hope you take some kind of next step, and even if you don't do anything, there's a chance there to ask us to pray about something for your life or somebody that you care about in your life, and we take that as a great privilege every Tuesday at our staff meeting. We take as much time as we need to pray through all those requests.